Hello students, so in this class we would study a story, and that's going to be an interesting story because that is based on an invisible man. So let us start with the story Footprints Without Feet. Now first of all, when I taught you his first flight, I did tell you that the book is named after the story. Similarly, this book is named after the fifth story which is given in the book, that is Footprints Without Feet. Now, Footprints Without Feet is written by H.G. Wells, who is a famous writer, author, and a novelist. And he wrote a very famous novel, that is The Invisible Man. And this story, Footprints Without Feet, is a part of that novel, is an excerpt from that novel, is an episode from that novel, which we are going to study. And this story is based on a scientist named Griffin. So Griffin के ऊपर ये story based है, and the episode unfolds the suspense behind the invisibility of Griffin, the scientist. And Griffin discovered or invented some sort of drugs. Using that, like after taking them, a human being can become invisible, and he misused it and he performed a lot of misdeeds using that, and he troubled a lot of people, and how innocent people behaved on his strange acts and on his clever acts. So this is what we are going to cover in the story. Now let me introduce you to the characters first. Our first and foremost character is Griffin. Now, Griffin is the eccentric scientist. Now, eccentric means strange, weird. So, he is a strange scientist who makes himself invisible. So, वो अपने आप को क्या कर लेता है? Invisible कर लेता है. He does not hesitate to resort to criminal activities to remain a mystery. And उसकी बहुत सारी activities ऐसी होती है which makes him a lawless person. He performs so many acts which should be counted under the criminal records, and how his presence and his absence and his acts are also a mystery that we'll get to know in this story. The second character is Mrs. Hall. She is a resolute but superstitious owner of the inn. Now, I'll define this thing later that who she is. For now, you just need to know that there is a character who exists like this in the story. And again, Mr. Jeffers. So, what role he performs in the story, that also we'll get to know when we start with the story. So, let's get started with the story. The story starts with two boys who observes that there are footprints, freshly made footprints on the path. Now, what they saw was really shocking and astonishing for them, because you can see, like they saw, and even if we see an event like this, we would be shocked too. So what they saw that there are freshly made footprints on the path, but there is no person who's making them. So you understand, आप जब when your feet are wet और आप चलते हो तो आपके पैरों के निशान बनते हैं. But if somebody is walking, then only footprints can be made. How can footprints be made without the presence of someone? And what they saw was just footprints, no person. So what they did, they followed the footprints. So उन्होंने उन footprints को follow किया, and they found out that the footprints were getting fainter and fainter. So it's so obvious, if your feet are wet, you would walk on a surface, your footprints would be made completely and properly. But after some time of walking, of course, your feet would get dry, and then complete shape of the feet would not be presented or would not be made. So this is what the same happens. Now this overall scene is a mystery for those two boys who followed the footprints but couldn't find a person who's making those footprints. Okay, so this was a mystery. Now comes the explanation of this mystery, and the explanation is simple enough. There's a scientist named Griffin, and the two boys were following that scientist, and this scientist has has invented some drugs. Using those drugs, he can convert a human being into an invisible transparent body. So you understand, after you intake those drugs, a person can become totally invisible, and he would be transparent but solid as a sheet of glass. So you understand, there's a person, that person is totally invisible, he cannot be seen to anyone, but his body would be a transparent sheet of glass. This means solid rahegi. For example, if I become invisible and if somebody passes near to me and if he gets like hit by me, he would feel that though I'm invisible but I'm solid. You understand? So this is what happens with Griffin. Now Griffin is a brilliant scientist, it's disclosed in the story, but he is a lawless person. Now why he is a lawless person? Because he performs so many activities which cause harm to other people, and he does so for his own benefit. So he was a selfish person who did not follow law at all, and he was such a mean person who would do anything for his own benefit and would not consider anybody else at all. And so there are series of incidents which are given in this episode where we would get to know that how Griffin was a lawless person. So describing the first event, the narrator mentions that once what happened, Griffin's landlord did not like him and he wanted Griffin to leave the house, and he asked to leave the house. So he does so, but he is so revengeful in nature. Griffin is so revengeful in nature that when he leaves the house, he sets the house on fire in order to take revenge. So बदला लेने के लिए वो अपने लैंडलॉर्ड के घर में आग लगा देता है and he escapes from there. Also, in order not to be caught by him, what he does, he takes those drugs which he himself invented or discovered and become invisible. So in order to escape from people, he becomes invisible. Now he is a wanderer, a homeless wanderer. He did not have home, he did not have clothes, he did not have money to rely on, he did not have food to eat, and he happened to step in some place where there was mud. He happened to put step in it, and when he came out of it, his footprints were getting imprinted on the path, and this is what the two boys saw in the starting. So the story started with two boys and they observed that footprints are made. So these footprints were the footprints of Griffin, who became invisible after taking those drugs, and he happened to step in mud, and when he came out of it, of course uske पैरों से निशान बन रहे थे, footprints बन रहे थे, but since he was invisible, so the two boys could not see him and he happened to make footprints on the path. Now he escaped easily from those two boys, but there happened a lot of incidents like I have told you earlier also, and there was one more thing. He had chosen a bad time to become invisible because this was a time of winter, and in mid-winter the temperature is really down. It's quite cold in London. So the whole story is based in London, and it's quite cold in London. And see, he became invisible, but of course he was feeling the cold. And just imagine, when you feel cold, you wear clothes, specifically woolen clothes. He wasn't wearing anything at all. He was naked. So you understand, he was feeling the cold even more than other people, because other people could cover themselves with clothes, but he did not have clothes at all. In order to become invisible, he had to shed his clothes. So he was completely naked. Now he wanted to escape from the bitterly cold wind, and in order to escape from that, he decided to get into a big London store. And he gets inside it, and it was no difficulty for him because he was invisible. So he got inside the store. When it was closing time and everybody left and the store was closed down, he kept himself inside the store, and it was a very peaceful night for him because he could eat there. So that was a complete store, mart sort of wo tha. So he could eat there, he could get clothes there, and he did not have to pay even a single penny for any of the things. So what he did, he opened a lot of boxes, he took clothes for himself, he covered his body, उसने अपनी body को cover कर लिया, warm clothes ले लिए, he took a hat, and he became a fully dressed person. Now he went to the kitchen storage, and there he ate cold meat and coffee. So this way he could eat well, and he covered his body, and it was so warm inside. And then at last he decided to sleep on a pile of quilts. So he sleeps there. Now everything was cozy and comfortable for him that night. but he couldn't manage to wake up on time the next day. So वो timely उठ नहीं पाया next day, and since he couldn't wake up on time, by the time he woke up, he realized that the store was already open, and he saw that there were store में जो managers होते हैं, जो persons होते हैं, तो he could see that people were actually approaching him, were coming towards him. So just understand, for those assistants in the store, he was like a thief who was already present inside. So of course that was natural that they would give him a chase. So they started to approach him, and in order to escape from them, he started to run. But he couldn't have run farther because he was visible, he was completely dressed. So उसने dress पहन रखा था तो वो visible लग रहा था, except for the head part. So पूरी body visible थी because neck से नीचे उसने clothes पहन रखे थे, तो clothes दिख रहे थे, and then the hat was visible, and the face part was not at all visible at all because it was transparent. So in order to escape from those assistants, what he did, he removed his clothes, because that was the only way he was left with. He removed his clothes and he became invisible. And as soon as he became invisible, the assistants were completely shocked because they couldn't find that where that guy has gone, who they were just chasing, and he suddenly disappeared. So this was shocking for them, but at least Griffin was safe here. And now again he was without clothes in the cold winter or in London. This time he made another plan, and he thought that he would try his hand at a theatrical company, and this time he thought that other than the clothes, he would buy some stuff to cover his face as well. And then he gets to Drury Lane. So Drury Lane कर एक lane यहाँ पे mention है. That lane is a hub for theater world. So there were lots of shops there where you can find costumes. So since he was invisible, so it was very easy for him to get inside any shop, and he got inside one such shop. वो जाता है shop के अंदर, he gets a dress for himself, he gets attire for himself, and then he takes a hat for himself, he takes bandages. वो bandages क्यों लेता है? Because he would cover his face with bandage. Then he took a pair of glasses, वो glasses का pair लेता है to cover his eyes. Then he takes a false nose, एक false nose होती है जो वो उसको stick करने के लिए लेता है. He takes whiskers, वो whiskers लेता है. So इस तरीके से he takes a lot of things to make himself completely visible. And this time he was visible because he was wearing something. At the same time his face was completely covered with bandages, his eyes were covered with glasses, there was a false nose, and then there was hat, and then there were whiskers. So you understand, this is how he made himself visible from invisible, and he can again go back to being invisible when he remove everything from his body. Now he did not want to be seen by the owner, so what he does, he attacks the owner of that shop from behind. वो पीछे से owner को attack करता है. At the same time he robs him, and he takes the money and he escapes from there. So you understand, he was a selfish person, and he was an unkind human being. He was cruel, and that is why it has been said that he was a lawless person. You would get further examples which would justify that how he was a lawless person. There were only a few mentioned up to now. So he decided that he would escape from the crowd of London, and he would go to a village nearby. He takes a train, and the village he gets in, the name of that village is Iping, and he books 2 rooms in a local inn, INN. So inn is a sort of guest house in which the owner lives there only. You can find a restaurant, a small restaurant, and you can find some rooms where you can stay. So what he does, he goes to Iping, he books 2 rooms in a local inn there. Now the landlord's wife, जो inn था, उस inn का जो landlord था, उसकी wife जो थी, she was Mrs. Hall. So now comes her character in the story. So she was the wife of the landowner of the inn in which Griffin booked the rooms, and he would stay there. So I hope Mrs. Hall's character is clear to you all. Now when he goes there, it was a weird and a strange thing for everybody in the village. Why? Because no tourist would come in such a time of the year, because it was literally chilly weather, it was so cold, it was bitterly cold, and no tourist would go and stay there. So when he goes there, people were literally talking about his arrival. So he became talk of the town that time. Now Mrs. Hall, she tried to be friendly with him. काफी friendly उन्होंने बात करने की कोशिश करी, but he was not at all interested in talking to her. Also, he made her clear that he wants some solace, and that is why he shouldn't be disturbed. He wants some peace, he should not be disturbed. This is one thing he clarifies. The other thing he clarifies is that there was an accident that has affected his face, and that is why his face is covered with bandages and all. Now, Mrs. Hall, she did find the scientist a little strange, and this is mentioned in the story also. So Mrs. Hall found the scientist strange, but since she was paid in advance, so she ignored his strange habits and strange behavior. So Griffin paid her in advance, and how did he pay her? How did he pay her? From the money he has stolen from that costume shop by attacking on the owner. So he pays her in advance, and then his money did not last for a long time, of course. So he was left with no money, and he acknowledges to Mrs. Hall that he is left with no money, and he is expecting that a check would arrive for him soon. So he would pay the payment when the check would arrive. Although in reality there was no check supposed to be coming, but this was a lie to keep her calm. Now shortly afterwards, he acknowledges that he is left with no money and a check is anticipated. There happens an extraordinary event. Now this extraordinary event, again this event is important because a question on this can be asked too. What was an extraordinary event? So we'll get to know this event now. A very curious thing happened, and the curious thing was early in the morning. Early morning mein, there was a clergyman. Clergyman is a priest in a church. So the clergyman and his wife, they got up from the sound of something, and this sound was the sound of chink of money that was coming from their study. So they thought that there must be some robbery going on in the house, and there is some robber in the house. So they go on to check, and when they go, they along with them, they took a poker. Poker is a rod sort of stuff was there. They took it along with them so that they can attack the robber, whosoever he is. The amazing part was, and I should better say the shocking part was, when they opened the gate, they found out that there was nobody in the room. There was no trait of any person in the room, and when they checked the drawer, they found the money stolen. There was no money there. The money was already stolen, but there was no trait of anybody's presence in the room. And the clergyman kept on saying for the whole day, extraordinary affair. So this was an extraordinary affair. Now, soon afterwards this event, जब ये incident होता है, उसके थोड़ी देर बाद क्या होता है? The landlord and his wife, that is Mrs. Hall and her husband. So they got up on time. They got up early in the morning, and they found out that the room of Griffin, the scientist, is open. The door is open. Generally, he doesn't open the door at all. He doesn't like that the door gets open, like remains open for a time being. So this was something strange for them. They found that the door is open, and it would be a proper time to get into his room and investigate for something, because of course Griffin was a little strange, and it was obvious to get suspicious on his arrival there. So Mrs. Hall and her husband, they decide to get into the room of Griffin. वो Griffin के room में जाने का try करते हैं. When they get inside the room, they find out that Griffin is not there. The scientist is not there. Even his clothes and the bandages and everything he wears on his face, everything is kept on the bed. Even the bed clothes. So यहाँ पे bed clothes refers to bed sheet. So even the bed cloth is cold. Now, why this particular line is mentioned that the bedcloth is cold? Because when you sleep and when you get up, you observe it yourself, when you get up, you would find that with the warmth of your body, the place where you are sleeping, that would become a little warm too.